I mean, the reason you like Mordecai so much is because you're a very religious man.
So religious, like so incredibly religious, yeah.
So absolutely, like, whenever people see you on the street, they'll be like, "See that guy?"
To the extent where they call me Religious Bryce, because that's just,
That's just who you are. So I can see why you gravitated, especially like the anti-Undertaker. You're like, no, he's a dead man. No, there's only one man that could rise from the dead, and it ain't the Undertaker.
Hey, guess what? It's time for Making Kayfabe with your hosts, Bryce and Dylan.
Greetings, one and all. It's Making Kayfabe here, and insert crafty little line here to open up the show. It's your good friend Bryce and Dylan here to take you through another rebooking of a glaring wasted opportunity in pro wrestling. But first of all, it's very important we find out, Dylan, how are you?
I'm alright, man. Thanks for asking.
I couldn't have wished for better news. That's great. You focused on Sean O'Haire last week, which has been phenomenally well received.
Yeah, dude, people seem to dig it, which is that's really nice, and I think it shows that there was a following for Sean O'Haire. There really is, like, since his unfortunate passing away, there's been a lot of people talking about how he was so underrated, and he could have done something. They should have done something more with him, and I think that comes out from the response we've had to our episode.
They should have, and like it's those videos we put on the Twitter, in the kind of last week or so about Sean O'Haire and just the vignettes and the promos he was cutting, just about you need to advising you to cheat on your wife or don't do your taxes or break the law and stuff like that. And it's just like the guy had such a great way of talking, and it's a damn shame. Like he's a huge missed opportunity from that kind of 2003-2004 era. And segue today, I'm going to be picking up another pro wrestler from that period who also has been linked with the question, what if he was given a chance? So a few weeks ago, probably a month ago actually, we ran a poll on our Twitter page at Making Kayfabe to settle a bet between ourselves. I went through this in last week's episode briefly, but the question was, who was the biggest of what could have been from the Ruthless Aggression era SmackDown? So it was between Sean O'Haire and Mordecai, which O'Haire won, but Mordecai was a close second. So that's who I'm going to be covering today. I'll take you through some brief history of the Mordecai character, tell you how I'd rebook him, and then maybe, if you're lucky, we might play a little bit of Kayfabe Tombola at the end of the episode.
I'm very excited.
Tell me, Dylan, what do you remember about Mordecai? Do you remember Mordecai?
Yes, I do remember Mordecai. I remember Mordecai because he came in 2003, right?
2004, I believe.
2004. All right, well, that was kind of the time that I wasn't really watching wrestling a whole lot, but for some reason, I think maybe my brother bought it or something. I can't remember, but I remember I had in my possession a copy of the old WWE magazine that they used to do, and there was a write-up about Mordecai in there. And I'm like, who the fuck is Mordecai? It sounds like I got off the boat at the right time before it hit the iceberg. Boy, was I wrong. A lot more icebergs to be hit by that boat. Boy, they were at some point they were just driving straight towards the fucking icebergs. You know what I mean?
I think it's ironic. I think it's ironic you saw him in WWE magazine, because like these writers tend to write their magazine articles like 3 months in advance. So by the time he was in the magazine, he was probably already off TV and never to be seen again. Yeah,
because he didn't stick around for too long, I hear. I remember in the magazine they talked about him fighting Scotty 2 Hotty. So I'm like, well, already this guy is a big deal because he beat legendary wrestler Scotty 2 Hotty. Now I love Scotty 2 Hotty, but also nobody is looking at a victory over Scotty 2 Hotty as a major point in their career, right?
Yeah, he's always a good way to debut, but yeah, he didn't do much. I was like you. I was a big fan of the Mordecai character as a kid, and I was disappointed when he disappeared so quickly. I just kind of thought he was cool as fuck. He was basically, and we'll touch on this in the episode, the anti-Undertaker, which in itself is a pretty cool idea. But I've been in a little bit of doubt about this episode because I'm worried that not many people will remember Mordecai, but for those of you who are tuning in, I genuinely believe that I've got a hell of a story for the characters, so there's no turning back now. So should I go into a little bit of history for Mordecai?
Yeah, I mean, the reason you like Mordecai so much is because you're a very religious man.
So religious, like so incredibly religious, yeah.
So absolutely, like whenever people see you on the street, they'll be like, "See that guy? That guy's
to the
fucking
extent
religious."
to the extent where they call me religious Bryce, because that's just
That's just who you are. So I can see why you gravitated, especially like the anti-Undertaker. You're like, no, he's a dead man. No, there's only one man that could rise from the dead, and it ain't the Undertaker.
So, where to begin with the character? It's this is going to be one of the most brief roundups because, in actual fact, he was only around for like 3 months because Kevin Fertig, the guy who played him, was sent back to developmental. So how did the Mordecai character come about? So, in an interview with Fightful, Kevin Fertig claimed that he pitched the idea of the character directly to Vince McMahon. Apparently, the character was originally meant to be called Malaki, but that was the only thing that changed from his pitch. He wanted Malaki to be a religious zealot, a weirdo kind of character, which is kind of exactly what Mordecai became. Vince loved the idea. He gave it the green light instantly after seeing him cutting a promo backstage for his character. So on the 15th of April, 2004 SmackDown, vignettes started to air from Mordecai. It had him dressed all in white in a dark room surrounded by lit candles and like ornate crosses, etc. An example of the stuff he said in his promos was, "You can't hide your darkest thoughts from me, your twisted fantasies that dwell in the back of your mind. You're perverted, you're sick of mind, you're sinful. You know who you are. Hear me, fear me, for the day of judgment draws near." In other promos, he claimed to be the right hand of the Father and said that he would punish evildoers. Cool. So the first sight of the character was at a SmackDown house show in Oklahoma on 24th of April 2004, where he debuted and he beat Paul London in a squash. Mordecai went on a brief house show run, defeating Paul London another 2 times, Shannon Moore 2 times, and finally the legendary Funaki. He made his debut at the Judgment Day 2004 pay-per-view in a classic, as you mentioned, 5-star match against Scotty 2 Hottie.
They put that on pay-per-view?
Yeah, it's Judgment Day.
Good God. What? So that was Scotty 2 Hottie's Judgment Day, was it?
There you go. It was his Judgment Day. Basically, it was a total squash match. It lasted 3 minutes, 2 seconds.
Hey,
and the guy... Right. Scotty hung in there for a good 3 minutes and just, unfortunately couldn't overcome the powers of Mordecai. But so when Mordecai came out, he came out to really ominous kind of like anxiety-inducing music. He had a big fucking staff thing that when he hit it on the ground, there was like pyro and like fire and shit. He was dressed in all white, which I guess was to show his purity, but to the extent where he got like his hair, his beard, and even his eyebrows bleached white. He was wearing blue contact lenses. He said a prayer before the match begun, just down in the corner. He had a vicar's collar on his attire. His finisher was like the razor's edge, so like a crucifix style powerbomb. And when he wins, he looks up to the heavens. So it's basically like extremely clear what his gimmick was. There was even a sign in the crowd which said Mordecai equals ratings, which
that was you.
Yeah, that was me right there, like little 12-year-old Bryce just cheering for Mordecai. It wasn't the case. He was never ratings, unfortunately. But basically the character's inception, it was clear to everyone who watched wrestling for more than 5 minutes that Mordecai was being built to be fodder with Undertaker. This was picked up on by Brian Alvarez on the 9th of May Figure 4 Weekly, where he said, "If the idea is to feed him quickly to Undertaker, they may as well just release him from his contract now and save themselves the trouble." Huh. So I think it's worth noting at this point that Kevin Fertig, the guy who played Mordecai, was really into the character. Like he almost like lived the gimmick. Like he would travel to and from shows wearing only white just in case like a fan saw him or something, and like he would snarl at fans who tried to get an autograph from him. Like a fun fact about Kevin Fertig himself that I found out is that his father in real life was an actual minister who like preached all this like fire and brimstone and all that fun stuff. Anyway, he was really into his gimmick, and he came up with the nickname the Pale Rider for himself. Ironically, he was actually quite tan, so he wasn't even that pale. But at the Great American Bash 2004, he beat Hardcore Holly. I thought it was weird.
Fuck it out.
He's going up from Scotty to Holly all the way to Hardcore Holly, all the way.
Well, this guy's he's. I think he's ready for the Undertaker right now.
That's the next logical step.
Good God.
I thought it was weird putting someone who's meant to be a heel against Hardcore Holly, because like by that time in 2004, everyone knew Hardcore Holly was a cunt. It was post Tough Enough 3, which had the Matt Capitelli incident. I don't know if you remember that, where Holly basically like beat the shit out of him for no reason, you know. I don't know if anyone actually liked old Bob Holly after that, and like.
Well, wasn't this? Didn't in 2004? Isn't that when he came back from his neck injury? Like, didn't Brock Lesnar like break his fucking neck?
I think it was early. You're actually right. I think it was early 2004 because it was a Royal Rumble, right?
Yeah. So I think he probably had some like sympathy. But that's still like months away from Judgment Day, I guess. Like, I don't see how he could have, ridden that sympathy train for that long.
Exactly. This is a Great American Bash. This is like July, I think. I've not actually got a date here. But yeah, I don't know. Like, Hardcore Holly, like, as a wrestling trainee myself, who is progressing pretty well without having the shit kicked out of me for no reason, I think it's fair that nobody liked him, you know. Anyway, in the match, they did a chin lock spot for so long that the fans started booing, and that's the only thing I've noticed. That was the only thing that happened. And like in the later appearances in SmackDown, he condemned the audience for their sins and led them in prayer. His final appearance was on the June 29th SmackDown in a 4-minute loss to Cruiserweight Champion Rey Mysterio, not even a week after his victory over the legendary Hardcore Holly, and in his third ever televised match. Yeah, so, a loss in 4 minutes to a guy who's like a foot shorter than him, 150 pounds lighter. It wasn't going to get better from there. And that was it. The character was no more after that. Never seen or heard from since that day, and just under 3 months after he debuted. In the 12th of July, Figure 4 Weekly, and by the way, the Figure 4 Weekly has been great for researching SmackDown in 2004, Alvarez reported that they have already given up on him, and he's been sent back to Ohio Valley. Alvarez also, just as a sidebar, like I wrote this one down because Alvarez, he also had an interesting take on these kind of bigger guys getting called up to the main roster from OVW, which was WWE's kind of developmental territory, the NXT of 2004. And I feel it's relevant, especially like leading on from your episode about Sean O'Haire last week. So what Alvarez wrote was he said the worst thing that ever happened to WWE was Big Musclehead Brock getting called up. Because even though he wasn't ready yet, he was a freak of nature and became an enormous superstar in a very short period of time. I think Vince and the writing crew got the idea that they could do the same thing with all the other muscleheads down there, and lightning has yet to strike twice. And I hope nobody in WWE is putting the blame on OVW for all these failures, because if they are, they deserve to go out of business. Which is an interesting take, because you had you think back to 2004, 2003, 2005. That's a very weird order to say those dates, but you have you got Mordecai, who went nowhere. You got Sean O'Haire, who went nowhere. You've got guys like Gene Snitsky. You've got God, who else? Like Heidenreich. My boy Heidenreich. You've got fucking Matt Morgan. He went nowhere. Remember him? It's just all these big guys who came up, done nothing, and then went away. There's probably even more. There's probably more out there, even if you look back at SmackDown roster. But
Viscera.
Oh yeah, he went for miles. That's.
Oh, but that's the thing. Like whenever he came in, people they called him up and they're like immediately, this is our guy.
Yeah, this is the guy who's going to lead us into the future.
This is the second coming of Kurt Angle, this guy.
This Viscera guy is the next Stone Cold, let me tell you.
He is going to... Viscera, would you like to wear white clothes and talk to Jesus? Because I think we've got an angle for you.
I think he did he not wear I don't know if it was white, but he wore a big pajamas and stuff at the end of his career, if I remember right, because he was the love machine or something. I remember.
For God's sake!
Coming up next, in Making Kayfabe, Viscera, the love machine.
Do you remember Big Daddy V?
Of course, I remember Big Daddy V with his big fucking tits.
With his fucking tits hanging out. God damn it! That's all. seriously, that's all anybody can say about Big Daddy V. It's like, well, his tits were hanging out.
Yeah, because they're so fucking blatant, and like, yeah, he was a very overweight man, I think. It's
Anyway.
fair to say. Anyway, that's Mordecai. Enough about Viscera's tits, all right? So,
wow, we'll see about that. Mordecai, that's Kevin Thorne, right?
it was, yeah. That's
Yeah.
actually where he went into. So he resurfaced, around 2006ish for the WWE version of ECW under the vampire gimmick.
In the new ECW.
Yeah.
Boy, we should talk about that sometime.
Yeah, we should go on a podcast and talk about that at some point.
Yeah.
Hey Sweet Chinwag, how you doing?
Now you guys owe us like £20.
Yeah.
Each.
It was already like 10, but now we just
it's up to 29. Yeah, we put our rates up. We're pros,
Yeah, hell yeah. But it was in ECW, and he done the whole kind of vampire gimmick, the gangrel gimmick there, when he had his manager, like vampire lover Shelly Martinez, and that basically went nowhere either. But he later brought the Mordecai character back for a run on the indie circuit until about 2000, from about 2010 until quite recently. His last recorded match as Mordecai was a losing effort in a match in January 2018 for the Right Coast Pro Wrestling Heavyweight title against Gene Snitsky, of all people.
Oh my goodness.
So there you go. It's a proper revival of like 2004, 2005 WWE. And if you look up Mordecai WWE on YouTube, there's footage of an indie match he had against Hornswoggle, who must plague me for every episode I do for Making Kayfabe.
God's sake.
But yeah, I think it's a shame the character went nowhere. So I want to go into like what I would do to make a success out of Mordecai. Like, is there anything you want to touch on before we dive in?
No, I want to hear the story.
All right, here we go. It's a good one. Let me tell you, I've got a lot planned for the guy. Let's go into it. So, what should have happened? So, I do believe WWE were somewhat on the right course for booking Mordecai before they gave up on him after like 3 matches. Like, whenever you have any big guy, like Mordecai he was 6'3", 270. Debuting on the main roster, a proven way to get them over is feature them against less important lower mid card kind of workers. Although you don't want to just like make them meaningless squash matches like a Ryback or like a Braun Strowman. You want to attach some semblance of a story to it. So I'd keep his debut the same. Keep the vignettes. Keep the squash against Scotty 2 Hotty. It doesn't really matter who he's squashing at Judgment Day because it's his Judgment Day, which is relevant to the brief promo I would have Mordecai cut after the squash match. So after he beat Scotty 2 Hotty, you would have him say, "This is Judgment Day, but the Judgment Day for sinners of WWE is not going to last a single day. 2004 will be the year of judgment, and I, Mordecai, I will see fit to do the Lord's justice and bring every miscreant to judgment. Hear me, fear me, for your day of judgment," and he like points at the camera, "draws near." And so you know what you do? You have Mordecai actively seeking out the sinners on the WWE SmackDown roster in 2004, and by golly, you can find a lot of sinners on WWE SmackDown roster in 2004. But hear me out. We know the guy was destined for Undertaker, but you don't want to just send the guy straight to Undertaker. As much as a great logical step, Scotty 2 Hotty, Hardcore Holly, that Undertaker is, you've got to build him up. You've got to establish like kind of mini feuds where the guy, where his goal every time is basically to make these miscreants atone for their sins. So he starts small. I think the ideal target for Mordecai in his first feud is a guy who was on the SmackDown roster in 2004 but was never really used much. Do you remember Shannon Moore?
I was really hoping you were going to say Scotty 2 Hotty.
Yeah, it's just very, very bad to Scotty 2 Hotty.
Yeah, and then have Scotty win.
Yeah, and then that's the end of Mordecai.
I do remember Shannon Moore.
Yeah. Well, the guy was Shannon Moore is a pretty sound kind of high flying wrestler between 2004 2005. He was mainly in the cruiserweight division, but he had a brief run as a follower of Matt Hardy. But none of that relates to why he's Mordecai's first victim. So, do you know why he goes after Shannon Moore?
Because of the tattoos.
Yep, exactly. You've done your research. He has got tattoos. It's because he's a sinner.
I've seen him.
Yeah.
I know that he's got tattoos.
Great research, Dylan. So you see, Dylan, I did my research for this. And in the Bible, the Holy Bible, the Book of God, There is a verse by Leviticus. It's Leviticus 19:28 to be exact. And it says, and I quote, "Ye shall not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor print marks upon you. I am the Lord." Shannon Moore,
dude,
famously.
if you have tattoos, you can't get buried in a Jewish cemetery.
Really?
So you're because of that line in the Bible. So if you're Jewish and have tattoos, they won't bury you in that cemetery, in a Jewish cemetery.
You have done your research. I didn't even know that.
As far as I know, that's true
There you
because of
go.
that line in the Bible. So there you go.
Happy days. So Shannon Moore.
Not happy days for the guys with tattoos. You can't get buried.
Oh yeah, exactly. But I mean, they're dead. Like, I mean, they don't really care, right? Shannon Moore, famously covered in tattoos, as you said, from head to toe. Hence, printing marks upon himself. He is a sinner. So for a couple or like a few weeks, you have Mordecai come out and stand like ominously at the top of the entrance ramp. Both Shannon Moore has like short matches in SmackDown. Like whenever the match is over, Mordecai he'll enter the ring and he'll leer over Moore because before Moore escapes, because this only happens after a match which the guy has just spent his energy on. There's no chance he's going to do anything against a monster like Mordecai after like a competitive wrestling match. So eventually they'll meet at the next pay-per-view, which I believe at this point is a Great American Bash, and Mordecai will just fuck him up basically, like a big old squasharoo, but have Mordecai go the extra mile here. So after all, he doesn't want to just beat Shannon Moore. He wants him to atone for his sins. This is his Judgment Day, so he does the thing where he's like got the guy beat, but the referee counts to 2, and then Mordecai like lifts his head up, he stops pinning him. And it's just so he can inflict more punishment. And he does this like 3 or 4 times, and every time he does, he shouts Leviticus 19:28 at Moore. He shouts, "Ye shall not make any cuttings on your flesh for the dead, nor print any marks upon you." And this would be good for getting over the character as a legitimate kind of crazy religious zealot. He's so purpose in the world just to make sinners repent. And then give Shannon Moore like 2 or 3 months off to sell the beating, because it's time for Mordecai to move on to his next sinner. But who is it? For his next victim, I'm going to go right back to the Bible, that famous book, the Bible, and reference Mark 12:31, Luke 6:31, and most importantly, Psalm 82:4. So Mark 12:31 says, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." Luke 6:31 says, "Do to others as you would have them do to you." And the important one, Psalm 82.4, "Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hands of the wicked." Mordecai is now going to focus on Hardcore Holly.
Yay!
So I touched on it briefly earlier, where I said I always thought it was weird that WWE put him against Hardcore Holly, who's a bit of a cunt. But this is where we give like his character a bit of depth. Maybe he's not just specifically evil. He's not the one-dimensional character who WWE brought up from developmental to die. So he's not 100% a heel. He genuinely understands what's right and wrong, and he knows that Hardcore Holly is infamously a bully. So based on plenty of stories about him, and most recently at the time, the uncalled for ass kicking he gave to poor Matt Capitelli. I mean, like, you know what they say about the best bad guys in movies and TV, right? The bad guys who are hailed as like the best of all time are the ones who you can understand. Like, they may be like a bastard, but what he's doing makes complete sense, and you kind of like begrudgingly have to accept it, and that's what makes a good bad guy, basically. So Mordecai, as per Psalm 82:4, is going to rescue the weak and the needy, which is Matt Capitelli and the others who are bullied, and deliver them from the hand of the wicked, which of course is Hardcore Holly. And he does basically the same thing with Holly that he did with Shannon Moore. Every time Hardcore Holly has a match in SmackDown, who's out there watching it live? It's Mordecai. But unlike Shannon Moore, when Mordecai enters the ring to confront Holly, Holly fights back. I've never been a fan of the guy, but I feel that his character wouldn't just let Mordecai punk him out, he'd fight back. So for a few weeks this happens, with Holly fighting back and Mordecai kicking his ass to the delight or the hatred of the fans, however you kind of feel about it. It leads to the match at the next pay-per-view, which would have been SummerSlam 2004, and that's where you have Mordecai and Hardcore Holly go into like a big brawl. I'm talking like all over the arena kind of thing, like not quite year 2000 Hardcore Championship kind of shenanigans, but they should properly like slug it out all over the building. And it's basically to establish Mordecai as a man who is able to like pick on someone his own size, but still come out on top. So it establishes him as one tough cookie, basically. So, and again, like similarly to the pay-per-view, the last pay-per-view even, he has Holly beat but refuses to pin him. He's shouting the Sam 82-4 at him repeatedly, rescue the weak and the needy, deliver them from the hand of the wicked, until eventually Holly passes out or something, and Mordecai pins him eventually. So from here, you can run with this formula for a long time. Like I said, there's plenty of sinners, so to speak, in WWE at this point. Like, for more examples of who Mordecai could feud with, you could have like the Ultimo Dragon or Rey Mysterio. They both wear masks, so they could each be like a false prophet, a wolf in sheep clothings. Matthew 17. You could have Booker T, famously an ex-convict. Isaiah 61:8 says, "For I, the Lord, love justice. I hate robbery and wrong." You could even have him feud with Carlito, who spits a mouthful of apple into people's faces. He wastes food, to which John 16:2 says, "Gather up the leftover fragments that nothing may be lost." So, like, if you want to go down that road, you can.
I thought you were going to say, like, he was conceited, like he had an ego, like selfishness is, they don't like that in the Bible, but no, you're like, no, he's wasting food.
He's wasting that apple. No one's going to eat that apple now. It's been spat out his mouth.
Tommy Dreamer would eat that apple.
He would if you'd paid him to. You're right.
Wow.
Well... But I think the storyline which could make Mordecai into that top star would be one with the much loved Eddie Guerrero. So I thought it was interesting that you focused on Eddie Guerrero for Sean O'Haire last week as well, because like I think it is relevant to include him in this as well. So Eddie Guerrero, like, I fucking love the guy, and to this day he's probably like my top 5 of all time. But although he did obviously clean himself up and become the legend he's known as today, his drinking problems are kind of well documented. Like, in 2001, he was fired by WWE after being arrested for drink driving, and he himself, he was very open about his drug use and how this basically spiraled his life out of control because of it. Like, I read his autobiography and he talks about it kind of in depth there. So, but also, like, even more interestingly, especially in relation to Mordecai, what's also well documented about Eddie is that he found God. Eddie was a very religious man in the final kind of years of his life, and there's hundreds of stories out there about wrestlers going to Eddie for help, and then he'd read them like a relevant Bible verse for the situation, which makes him the perfect target for Mordecai. So Peter 5:8. Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. By this time, we're past Eddie's WWE title run. We've had his feud with JBL, and he's ready to go out and take another feud on, basically. So Mordecai zeroes in on Eddie. At the 2005 Royal Rumble, the person who drew number 1 was Eddie Guerrero. I think the obvious thing to do here would be to have Mordecai enter the Rumble, have a fair showing by tossing out a few superstars over the top rope, and then have him eliminated by Eddie. So we've seen it before, but it works perfectly. Mordecai would then re-enter the ring, attack Eddie from behind, and make sure he gets eliminated, because the Royal Rumble famously are no DQ. In real life, again, and we do love to tie real life shit into Making Kayfabe as much as possible. On the SmackDown following the 2005 Royal Rumble, which was February 3, 2005, Eddie Guerrero lost a 19-minute match to Booker T, in which was a tournament to decide the number 1 contender for the World Heavyweight Championships. So, how did he lose in my storyline? Obviously with Mordecai and Mordecai interference. So Mordecai interferes in the match. Notably, he doesn't attack Booker T because, as we've covered just there, he's already made Booker T repent for his sins. He needs a new victim, and that's Eddie. He attacks Eddie in the ring. He cuts a promo on him, touching on how Eddie has recently found God. He says, so this is a promo we've written from, so he says, "The Lord is aware that you have found him recently, but the Lord is also aware that Mordecai has found and followed him from birth. Eduardo, you're trying to follow God, but the devil still prowls within you. You must atone for your sins like everybody else. You must meet your judgment day." Again, Peter 5:8 in the Bible says, "Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour." So it becomes Mordecai's mission to beat the devil out of Eddie Guerrero. You could do loads with him, providing Eddie would be happy to go full in on it, kind of thing. But maybe you can show him maybe Eddie doubting his devotion to God, or now that he's faced with like a crazy religious zealot who has memorized the Bible page to page, maybe Mordecai tries to tempt the devil out of him by like leaving drink in his locker room or doing evil things like pouring whiskey over the interior of his lowrider or something, like, so it's all you can smell. You can go full on crazy and have like a barroom brawl or something with the issue at hand here. So I think realistically Eddie would have to win that feud, because it would get because of how his real life is and stuff, but it would get a prominent spot at a pay-per-view, the next of which would be No Way Out 2004. In real life, all Eddie did was face the fucking Basham brothers, so I think if it's done right, Eddie Guerrero versus Mordecai could be the semi-main event. And this basically has now established Mordecai as a solid upper mid-carder who can hang with the names like Eddie Guerrero, the names like Booker T, the names like Rey Mysterio, the names like Scotty 2 Hotty, all the names. But that leads us into March of 2005, where a certain undead man is in the middle of cementing a pretty impressive WrestleMania streak. So it's always been said, and we touched on it earlier, like Mordecai, he was made to fight Undertaker at some point, but knowing WWE, if they actually do it, they'd have done it far too soon. So at the time, Undertaker was begging for credible opponents. Side note again, at the pay-per-view, I just noted there, No Way Out 2005, Undertaker defeated Luther fucking Reigns in a singles match. Remember him?
Wow.
So there's another big guy who came out to the main roster and done fuck all. But yeah, I'm pretty certain that if WWE had their way, they'd have thrown Mordecai to Undertaker before he's anywhere near ready, and then he'd job out and never be heard from again. So half of which did happen, I suppose. But right now you've got Mordecai, who's established with wins over big names, and only one loss in a hard-fought match with the legendary Eddie Guerrero. This is the opponent Undertaker needs going into WrestleMania. So we're finally going to get it. Undertaker versus Mordecai. Anyway, I'm almost done here, but the way you build the story is, the way you explain Mordecai only now coming for Undertaker after almost a year in the company, is you tell the story that Mordecai was originally terrified of Undertaker when he came to WWE. That's why I hadn't targeted him yet, because Mordecai, he's read Isaiah 26:19, which states, "Your dead shall live, their bodies shall rise. You who dwell in the dust, awaken and sing for joy, for your dew is a dew of light, and the earth will give birth to the dead." Isaiah 26:19. So also, basically, the Bible actually talks about fucking zombies if you Google hard enough, so that's pretty cool.
The Bible is wild, dude.
There's a lot of crazy shit going on in there, right?
Dude, like, you have no idea. Well, you do, because you read most of it by the signs of it, but some of that stuff in that Bible, you're like, whoa, they don't talk about this in church. Hello.
Yeah, that is literally zombies are talking about. Like, they're talking about the dead coming back to life. So, but now he's not as scared, because he has like he's made many sinners of the WWE repent. He's wised up, and he claims that his Lord Jesus Christ is the only man, as you mentioned earlier, Dylan, the only man who is risen from the dead, and the Undertaker is a fraud. So now Mordecai realizes what he must do. He must make the Undertaker repent. And there you have it. What Mordecai could have been. Like, I don't suggest Mordecai going on to beat the WrestleMania streak of the Undertaker, but again, you got to put him in that featured match, and he will be over by this stage, because having a match with Taker at WrestleMania will only do more for him. Mordecai could have been something, man. I'm honestly gutted that the character was scrapped, but hey, WWE's fuck ups make good content from Making Kayfabe. So yeah, what do you think?
Well, they turned him into a vampire, so like that's pretty good, right? Like, what's the difference?
Actually,
vampire, religious zealot, the same fucking. I gotta say, right? I had joked earlier about how you were a deeply religious man, and then You just like come out here with all these Bible verses, and I'm like, shit, dude, is Bryce really like super religious? Oh my god, you've done a lot of research. I gotta say, like that is impressive, and that's the kind of thing that I would really have loved, because it's a little touch like that. It's the kind of thing they didn't do in Mordecai. Like, here's a religious guy, and he doesn't do anything. Like
that was it. That was his gimmick, a religious guy. That's it.
But who gives a fuck about that, right? But
Yeah.
if you have this guy in here and he's twisting words, he's using the Bible to like justify his own like mental state, and he's like, no, you're the sinner because you did this in the Bible. Like he can twist it and reference points and stuff like that. It gives meaning behind like his motive and the reason he's doing all this shit. And like you said, it makes a really good contrast against the Undertaker.
Yeah.
So like the way you kind of like pitched it makes sense. I really like that with the Bible quotes and stuff. Because before this, the only other fucking guy who did it was Steve Austin, and he wasn't taking it seriously at all. He was taking the piss.
Yeah. That was Jake Roberts, right? He was Jake Roberts reading the Bible or something like that. I don't actually know the story, but yeah,
you talk about John 3:16. Because I believe Jake was going through a religious period at that point.
Yeah.
So you know what John 3:16 says.
Yeah, of course I do. It says,
and you know what Austin
Stone Cold's the greatest wrestler of all time, right, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, he's like, watch out for zombies. Boy, the Bible is fucking weird.
It is a strange book, and like it's funny you mentioned Kevin Thorne, because and I was in two minds about including this bit or not, but I do have a part of the story, maybe a year ahead or so, which links Mordecai to Kevin Fertig. To Kevin Thorne, his other gimmick, the vampire. I'm hesitant to go into it, but like, do you want to hear it?
Well, do you want to say it, or do you want to keep it for a future episode?
Fuck it, we'll just say it. We'll give the audience what they want. So I guess like my advice is that if you were satisfied with the ending to my Mordecai story, maybe skip the next 2 minutes of the podcast because basically I said earlier that wherever I can, I try to like link my stories into real life happenings. So here's like what do you call it, an addendum or something, like to the Mordecai storyline, if you will. And this is how you transform Mordecai into a vampire. So you know how I had Mordecai stalking his opponents, like Shannon Moore, Hardcore Holly, Eddie, like how he'd always stand at the top of the ramp and look down on their matches. Well, one day Mordecai receives a note, and it says something to the effect of like, you like stalking people, huh? Try this on for size. And
what a strange note to receive.
And he receives like these weird notes for like weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. Somebody is now stalking Mordecai, which is a turn up for the books, right? Anyway, like, when I've not got the whole story, but when the big reveal comes, the stalker is revealed as Shelly Martinez, who in real life was Kevin Thorne's manager during his WWE ECW runs. So it turns out that she too is a vampire, and without going into too much detail, I'm sure you've all seen the movies, but she turns Mordecai into a vampire, which leads to Kevin Thorne. So yeah, anyway, I thought that was a cool alternate ending that you could have done with Mordecai character, but. Anyway, do you fancy some tombola of the kayfabe variety, my friend?
Hey, why not? You only live once, right? You only live once unless you're Jesus or the Undertaker.
Yeah. All right, kayfabe tombola time.
Yay.
So if this is your first time listening to our show, first of all, thank you, and we hope that you're enjoying it. But at the end of every episode, we play a little game called Kayfabe Tombola. So the rules of the game are that the Making Kayfabe co-host who isn't telling the story that week, which is Dylan this time, has to choose a number-letter combination from 1 to 4 and from A to D. Numbers 1 to 4 are wrestlers, letters A to D are situations, and whatever Dylan picks, whether it's 1A or 4C or 2B, whatever, he'll have 60 seconds to come up with a storyline that makes sense. So, without further ado, Dylan, could you please give me your best number-letter combination?
Yes, I certainly could, Bryce.
What's your best one? What have you got for me?
It's got to be 4D.
4D?
Yeah, it's even better than 3D.
Oh my god. Okay.
You can see through wood.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So, instead of just wrestlers, I've gone with tag teams this week.
Ooh.
So mix it up a little bit. So who you could have had were the world's greatest tag team.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't get them. You could have had La Resistance.
Okay.
You didn't get them. You could have had Kai and Tai. You didn't get them. Who you did actually get, and this is great because it leads on from what we were saying earlier, you got Too Cool.
The greatest wrestler of all time.
The greatest wrestler and Grandmaster Sexy.
There we go. We got there.
So you got Too Cool. The situations that you could have had. So you could have had A, which was recruit a third member. Who is it and why does it make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You didn't get that. You could have had B, ends up having to shave Albert A-Train's back. How does this come about? You didn't get that. You could have had C, change their gimmicks to become the polar opposite of themselves. So,
okay. That would have been fucking sweet.
But what you did choose was Too Cool, completely forget one important rule of wrestling and chaos ensues. What is the rule they forget and why does it happen?
Okay.
This is going to be great.
Yeah.
So, are you ready?
Yes.
You ready to go with that?
You got 1 minute on the clock for me?
I'm just getting a timer up right now, so use the next 5 seconds wisely.
Let me just go over it real quick, just so I'm totally clear. Okay. Yeah. Too Cool. Do they just forget an important rule in wrestling?
Yeah. So one important rule in wrestling, basically. So it could be any rule, but they forget it, what it is, and the chaos ensues.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I mean, kind of. I don't know how I'm gonna fill a whole minute, but all right.
You got this. 60 seconds. It's not a minute. It's only 60 seconds, so you're fine.
Oh, that's all right. That's like fuck for that. Good God.
3, 2, Too Cool. Completely forget one important rule of wrestling and chaos ensues. 1, go.
Okay, so Too Cool are a tag team, and they were in the Attitude Era. So we're gonna have them have a wrestling match against Edge and Christian, who are the tag team champions. And Edge and Christian are like, we can beat you. We're not afraid of you. Too Cool. And but just to get the advantage over them. But backstage, Edge and Christian do the concerto, so they hit them both over the head with 2 chairs. And then they're like, all right, let's have the match now. So Edge and Christian come out, and they have their match. And Too Cool come out with bandages around their heads, and they start having a tag team match. Scotty Duhatti's in the ring, and he's fighting Christian. Christian tags to Edge, and then Scotty Duhatti's like, what the fuck? What would you just do? It's like, you were smaller than that. What the hell? And he's pointing at Christian over there. He's like, I want to fight that guy. What's this? And what do you call him? Grandmaster's like, hey, who you yelling at? And Scotty's like, hey, what's this guy? So the referee's like, it's a tag team match. You have to tag in and out. And Scotty's like, tag team? What the fuck are you? What? This is a one-on-one match. Where is everybody looking at me? So Edge hits him with a spear and he pins him. And so that's the end of Too Cool and their tag team championship run.
That's the end. That's it. Time's up. That was a hard one. That was a difficult one. You did really well with that. Like, you forget how to tag team wrestle. Yeah.
The problem is, like, I don't think I explained it well, because as soon as you said it, I'm like, well, obviously they're a tag team who forget that they're what tag team wrestling is. Yeah. But then I was like, how do I explain it properly? I don't know. We got there. You
got there in the end, and it's making Kayfabe Tombola is always hard and stressful. So, it's you done well with that, buddy. I like that.
It's harder than it looks.
That's it, exactly. It's we're seasoned pros here. Like, don't try this at home. Is all we're saying. Don't try and make Kayfabe Tombola at home, because injuries can ensue and
mistakes are real.
Yeah,
Bones
exactly.
can be broken.
Exactly. We've made it to the end of the show.
Yay!
And by the way, thank you for listening. I really do hope you enjoyed our Mordecai episode, and if you did, then, well, we've got more where that came from. If you check your podcast app right now, you'll find as many as 12 other episodes to wrap your ears around, including rebookings of the Kane unmasking storyline from 2003, the Right to Censor in the early 2000s, the Vince McMahon exploding Limo storyline from 2007, and even a feature that you yourself did recently on the AEW Women's Division, so, which is, I guess, from like this year and maybe forever. So
probably forever the way they're going.
Probably forever. Like even even to this day, well, to this day, it's like 2 weeks after the episode, but still, they're still not giving it much attention. But hey, you can check us out on Twitter at Making Kayfabe. So tweet us, tell us, let us know what your thoughts are about this episode. We've often got fun little kind of polls there as well, which you can join in, and we're always tweeting daily. So come and join the conversation. And if you want as well, you can email us at makingkayfabe@gmail.com. But yeah, give us a shout anywhere. We'd be happy to hear from you. Next week, Dylan's going to be taking the reins, and he's got a cracker of a storyline to go through. I can't wait for that. Dylan, have you got any actual clues for what's coming up next week?
Yeah, I alluded to it earlier in the show.
Oh, so it could be anything from Scotty to Hottie to Gangrel. Right.
I don't even think I said Gangrel, did I? Although, well, let's put it this way. It's not Scotty to Hottie. So if you want a real clue for what it is coming next week, go back and listen to the show again, and then listen to it a third time. Yeah,
there you go. And it's not Scotty to Hottie, so it narrows it down anyway. So, but until then, we've been making kayfabe. You've been awesome, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.